Here we go. Let's just find out what I'm doing here and what I'm going to talk about. Let's start with something that was a bit of a thriller mystery. This is called Local Missing Woman. I'm trying to think of how I could start talking about this book, and I have a hard time following various characters. It was a really good book, so let's get to this. I guess because it's called Local Missing Woman, we have to talk about the fact that we have the perspective that this book starts out in. This is why I almost gave up on this book, actually. The perspective was a woman named Shelby. She's not really faithful to her husband. I was kind of like, please don't be one of those books. This is the only time we get Shelby's perspective. She had just had a baby and she goes missing. And so then it goes into the perspective of this little girl. She's in this like dark basement type of area. She's not really sure. It's just really dark and she's been there a long time. She doesn't even know how old she really is because it's just been that long. And there are two people that have been holding her hostage. So she wants to make an escape finally. This is also the only time we get her perspective. So then we go into, I'm just like, wait, why don't we go back to these two people? But there's reasons why, and I really liked how they did this. Leo, he talks about how his sister went missing when she was 6, and now it's been 11 years. He's always been behind the shadow of Delilah. Like everyone kind of talks about him because, you know, they talk about his sister. So he kind of feels like his dad kind of has pushed him aside because his focus has been so much on finding his sister. And we find out that his mother is not alive anymore. So then I'm just like, oh, well, what happened to her? So we go into Meredith's perspective. Meredith is his mother, and it goes back like 11 years ago. Now, she is a yoga instructor. Also, she is a doula. So she has this new client that is pregnant, and this client is Shelby. So everything kind of connects. Meredith is married to Josh, and she really has a good marriage. She enjoys being with her husband. They haven't had as much time together lately. She loves her kids so much. And so it's just interesting to find out her backstory, and it builds over time in this book, and I love it. It's really good. And then last we have Kate's perspective. Kate is the neighbor of Meredith and Josh, and ultimately their 2 kids. Now Meredith, she lives with her girlfriend, and she talks about between 11 years ago and today. So her perspective is like going back and forth from both times. She really wants to find out what happened to Meredith. So again, we know that Meredith is the mother of Delilah, who has been missing. And then we also have, you know, we find out that Meredith is dead. So we find out like what happens during that time. And Kate, she also feels so horribly for Josh, the father, and so she talks about what it's like being their neighbor. Also a good friend to both of them. I hope that kind of clears up a little bit of what the story is. I cannot go any further because then it might give spoilers away, but it was so well done. Now, I have followed true crime stories for a long time. You know, there's a lot of failed police searches that I have learned about, but there's also ones where they do a really good job. So with this story, I feel like the author probably took some from both of those type of things, because some of the stuff in here, you're like, oh, well, how is that possible? But at the same time, like, but I've heard stories where that is possible. So anyway, realistically, this kind of could be. I loved this. It had a twist ending that I was like, wow, okay. Like, as it was near the end, you start to figure out like what's going on and you go, oh man, but it's good. So I had a lot of fun reading this one. Now, if we're going to talk about some investigation, true crime type of things, I need to talk about one of my spring to read list books that I've been wanting to read that I gave up on, guys. I'm going to explain real quick. The Woman in the Garden. This was a book that I was like, oh, it's like a thriller. And I was like, oh, I don't even know what this is about, but it's some sort of mystery about this woman that loves plants and she's into horticulture and all sorts of things. And yeah, I read the first couple chapters where she is pretty much just a voyeur. She's watching her neighbor and there's a lot of sexual stuff. So I gave up on it. I said, I don't feel like reading this anymore. I couldn't get into it. I didn't enjoy it. So yeah, I have no idea how this story goes, so I gave up. So because it was a spring to read list book that I really wanted to read, I said, I gotta replace something with another thing that has some sort of garden growing book that I have been wanting to read. So I said, you know what? Let's go from this book that I gave up on because of its content to something that's wholesome. So why not do an Amish type of story. So The Peacemaker, this is the second book in a series. The third book is coming out later in this year, I believe. The first book I had read, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I did enjoy some of the story, so I said, I want to read this, I want to continue on. The first story, I believe it's called The Protector. It was about a brother and his sister goes missing, and he's very obsessed with trying to find out where his sister went. And then he also has a relationship that he's trying to have at the same time, but it's hard because he's so obsessed with trying to find his sister. In that book, he has another sister. This sister's name is Susan, and I did not like her in the first book. She was a little bit whiny. She's a little bit jealous of her sister that went missing because she feels like she is the favorite. Norman is the brother that has been searching, and then Susan is this sibling that I just had a hard time with her. She was just so jealous, guys. This one is mainly about the sister that goes missing, Rosa, her best friend. Her best friend's name is Ada. So Ada, she works in a greenhouse. She loves plants. So this is very springy, and she really misses her best friend. She doesn't know where she is. She's always had this crush on the ex-boyfriend of her best friend, Ephraim. Norman, the brother that's obsessed with finding his sister, accused Ephraim of being the last one to see his sister, and he thinks Ephraim killed her or something like that. So now in this book, he's doing his best to help his grandmother. And so he goes back and forth between being with his family at home where he grew up and helping his grandmother. Ada, she tries to continue her friendship with Ephraim, but at the same time, she doesn't really want to be friends with him, but she's kept it a secret for all of her life. So it's a little bit of a love story between them. And also we have Susan, the annoying sister. She has this guy that she's really, really into that is troublemaker. And this troublemaker, originally, Norman's love interest from the first book is named Selena. Selena in the first book had been slightly dating this one troublemaker kid that now Susan, the younger sister, is very into. Susan with her love story as well. There's lots of drama. It's very good. This was so much better than the first book. I loved this in comparison. So now I'm looking forward to the third book. I'm glad I switched this up for being my spring to read list book. Much better. Remember this book from my spring to read list? This is about minimalism. This woman, now what I didn't know when I got this book is that this is the woman that created Project 333. If you don't know what that is, back when I was a vintage fashion blogger, I believe this was long ago now, like 2010 or something like that. I heard about this project, and as a minimalist, I was like, hey, that's really cool, but I never had enough clothing to do it. So the idea is that for 3 months, you wear 33 items of clothing, and there's specific types, like it doesn't include certain things like workout clothes. It's a little bit strict, but so she is the one that started that. So this book though is about when she gets multiple sclerosis. It starts out with that, but then it goes into her lifestyle and how, because of her illness, she became a minimalist and what that looked like for her and how it changed her life. She gives lots of tips for people that maybe want to be interested in simplifying their life. Now, she is a Christian, but she doesn't talk about it at all in the book until the very last chapter, and it's brief. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I love hearing people's stories and what gets them into simplifying their life and being minimalist. It's always so fascinating to hear people's different takes on it. I also read The Enchanted April. Now this book I only recently started to get an interest in, and I figured since it was April, it was the very end of April when I started this book, and I finished it the very first couple days of May. It was okay, it wasn't that great. It's about these 4 women, mainly one that she has what she calls a nest egg, where she finds this castle in Italy that she wants to rent for the summer, but it's a little bit expensive, so she says to these strangers basically hey, you want to come with me? And what's very odd about that is I don't think I would ever ask some random women that I hardly know, hey, you want to go on a vacation with me for 3 months in another country? That's just a little awkward, but hey, this book was written 100 years ago, so maybe it works out that way, where they were a little bit better with that than I think they would be today. The main women, most all of them are married. This talks about what the relationships are like. When they go, they're just kind of enjoying it. The way that the scenery is talked about and described, I really thought it was beautiful. It made me want to go there. It was lovely. I couldn't connect with the characters, and I really wanted to, but it wasn't a bad story. I just didn't delight in it like I would hope to. Forward me back to you. This book is about human trafficking. Now, I am a resources advisor for an organization that spreads awareness about human trafficking. We partner with different organizations trying to help them out, and we also connect with law enforcement and different things like that. We connect with safe houses in the area. So my job one of the things I do is that I read lots of books. So I have to read up on human trafficking books and movies and stuff like that. And so it's been a while since I've done so. This one is a Christian book, and it's heavily Christian. Now, I'm a Christian, so I read a lot of Christian books, but I mix them up. So when you watch my reviews, you'll see there's a lot of mixture of non-Christian books and Christian books. This one is aimed for teens. I think that this was a really good way to spread awareness to teenagers, to get them to understand what human trafficking might look like in India specifically. We have the main two characters in this. Katina, now she lives in California with her mother, and she talks about, right in the beginning, she is sexually assaulted. They don't go into depth they don't describe craziness about like what goes on. They do explain slightly so you can understand why she is so pained and traumatized by this situation. Because she can't handle it where she lives and goes to school, she decides to leave the area. She goes to Boston and she lives with this older woman who becomes like an adoptive grandmother to her. She even calls her that. And once she's there, she starts going to her grandmother's church. There is this youth pastor and just a few kids, and one of the kids' name is Robin. Now, this is not a romance tale for them. It's a friendship. Robin, he was born in India and adopted by white people. So he talks about what that feels like for him to not look like his parents and to wonder about who his parents are, especially his mother. So this youth group, they're making a trip for like 10 weeks in India for the summer. Because a lot of them are college bound, Katina and Robin, they decide to go, as well as another girl. The whole idea of why they're going to India is to work with victims of human trafficking or even law enforcement. Now, the author, they actually base this off of people that exist, not the teens, but organizations that really do exist. Believe this person has worked with them in the past, so they knew a lot of information, and it was really good with what statistics they had. And I was like, okay, good job, because sometimes I've read these books and I'm like, no, that's not realistic to what it's like. This one totally is. This one, when you're in India, the way that they treat the survivors, the way the law enforcement works in this, it was so perfect. And I really enjoyed this. It was a very good book, and I was surprised. I got sucked into it. I was intrigued, and I was really glad. And you think a lot of fiction books that I read on this subject are not that great, but this one was. And last but not least, another one of my spring to read list books that I wanted to read. This one was the third and fourth books. So these are two books in one, Pollyanna of the Orange Blossoms and Pollyanna's Jewels. I gotta backtrack. I loved the first two books, and then when I started reading this, I found out, wait, this way of writing is a bit different. And then I looked at the author. It's a different author. So then I had to research it. This author, what happened was the original author died. And so then the publishing company asked this author, which is really cool actually, because this was written in the 1920s by a Black woman writing about white people. And I thought it was fascinating. I was like, that is really cool that this Black woman in the 20s was able to write these big hit books. Did the books do as well as the original two? No. But still, I was like, this is really cool. So it made me look at the books in a little bit different way of being excited about them. However, the way that they were written, she tried her best to try to tie in some of the stuff from the past. Like, she just brought things up regularly that it's like, okay, the way that their characters and the storylines were, it just didn't seem to flow as well as the original stories. I just loved those. I gave both of the first two books like 4 stars. They're my favorite. This one, not that great. The third book, so the Orange Blossom book. This one is about Pollyanna and her husband. She's married now. And it's about what her life is. They move to a place, and then they have neighbors that are also newlyweds. That doesn't really happen in real life all the time, but hey, you know what? So they talk about their struggles, and it kind of reads like an I Love Lucy type of thing, like how the two women neighbors act with the two, slightly. But then there's stuff that is like, this isn't really as family friendly as I believe the other ones were. And then the last book, so the Pollyanna's Jewels, this is about her children. And from that, I was getting so bored. This one was not that great. This was the worst of the 4 books in the series. I think there's either 1 or 2 other books in this series. I think I'm done. This book, the 2 books as a joint book, it took me a while to get through. And when I read books, I read them like this. This book, I did not read like this. This one was like, I'll read a chapter today and maybe I'll get back to it tomorrow. So I know this was a lot of books in one episode. I wanted to try to catch up to where I am. I'm almost done with my spring reading books. I'm looking very forward to finishing them up. We're in May now. By the time I'm usually like 2 weeks ahead when I do these videos. So thank you guys for watching, and let me know what you've been reading the past couple weeks. All right, guys. Well, thank you. Bye.